The Church of San Giovanni Battista is the oldest surviving church inside the city walls of San Gemini. It was first built in 1199 as a small basilica-type Romanesque church. In the past 8 centuries, the church has gone through multiple expansions and transformations resulting in the present unusually shaped building. In this presentation, we will try to explain the different phases in the evolution of the church. Keep in mind that some of the dates are approximate or our best guess. The earliest version of the church was dedicated on 1199 AD. This date is derived from a commemorative epigraph on the facade of the building. It was a small basilica-type, Romanesque church, with an irregular plan. The only remaining element of this church is the southeast facade that faces Via della Mura. The facade is a somewhat symmetrical and typical of Romanesque basilica-type churches. It has a higher central section topped by a gable roof corresponding to the central nave. Further down there are the 2 sloping walls that correspond to side aisles. The portal, lunette, bifold window, and the mosaic medallion under the gable are all reused decorative materials from other buildings that were incorporated in this facade. The design of the facade implies a symmetrical composition. The right side of the facade, however, is missing. It is not clear whether it was ever finished or it was partially demolished at a later time. The irregular shape of the plan is probably due to pre-existing defensive structures located on the right side of the church. It was not unusual for small medieval churches to have irregular plans and asymmetries, particularly when built within tight urban spaces. The plan develops at an angle to the facade. It has a central nave and one side aisle to the left. On the right side there is no evidence of an aisle was ever built, unlike what is implied by the facade. At the end of the nave there probably was a semicircular apse that was located at the end of what is now the first bay of the church. When this church was first built, it opened on a small square that was at a level just under the first step from the entrance. All the stonework below this level, including the steps and the right edge of the facade, is modern material, installed during the 1973 renovation.
In the early 13th century, the city of San Gemini expands its defensive perimeter. This transformation required the construction of a new city gate, the present Porta Tuderte, built adjacent to the church of San Giovanni Battista. The steep sloping road leading out of the new gate necessitated a drastic reconfiguration of the piazza in front of the church. The ground level was lowered by more than 1 meter, revealing the ancient necropolis and rendering the original church entrance impractical. Consequently, a new entrance to the church was created, oriented toward a side courtyard that would later develop into the Piazzetta San Giovanni. This original entrance remains closed until the 1973 renovation of the medieval facade.
During the 14th century, the church goes through major changes. It becomes part of a newly formed Augustinian monastery, located inside some nearby defensive structures that had been rendered obsolete by the expansion of the city's defensive perimeter. This probably takes place sometime between 1342 to 1367, when Agostino Tonacci, an Augustinian, was Bishop of Narni. At the time, San Gemini was part of the dioceses of Narni. At this point, the church expands substantially and is stylistically transformed into a Gothic church made of 4 bays topped by masonry groin vaults with pointed arches. The other important change was that an obsolete defense tower that was part of the city walls was incorporated into the church and transformed into the church bell tower. At the ground level, the tower houses the sacristy of the church. The entrance of the church remains from the Piazzetta San Giovanni. We are not sure where the main altar was located. It is possible that at the northern bay of the church there was an apse, and that was the location of the main altar. At the moment, the oldest altar, built in the 16th century, is located roughly in that position. A few pieces of interior decorative art from this period are visible along the northwest wall, the main one being the fresco of the Madonna and Child. In 1527, San Gemini is sacked and burned by the troops of Emperor Charles V that were retreating from Rome. It is well documented that together with the collaboration of the city of Terni, they sacked the nearby city of Narni and did the same to San Gemini. It is possible that they take the city breaching through the Porta to Dert, damaging substantially the defenses around that gate and adjacent structures. In 1530, the town was given to Ferdinando Orsini, 5th Duke of Gravina, a Neapolitan nobleman, as a feudal holding by Pope Clement VII, in payment for some outstanding debts. The fief required the Orsini to reconstruct the city. Part of this reconstruction effort included both repairs and expansion of the Church of San Giovanni Battista. Sometime before 1567, the church goes through its last major expansion. The two bays on the north side are added and are built by incorporating an adjacent obsolete defensive tower and another small structure, perhaps an old apse. The church now starts to take its irregular-shaped plan. Besides adding two new bays, the entire interior of the church is decorated in a late Renaissance style. Another important change is that the floor of the church is paved for the first time, and burial crypts are built. Before that time, the floor was made of compacted earth and graves were dug under the church floor. At this time, the church comes under the Orsini patronage. We find in it two fine paintings that include iconography tied to the Orsini family. One is the painting of the Madonna of the Belt on altar A. The other is the Madonna of the Rosary on altar B, that originally was in a now defunct chapel dedicated to the Confraternity of the Rosary.
In the 17th century, there is not any major changes to the church. Most work is done to the adjacent monastery that is substantially expanded and is connected to the church by a bridge that connects the monastery to the second level of the sacristy/bell tower. On that level, the monks build a screened balcony to follow the services. In 1703, there was a strong earthquake in southern Umbria. The church was heavily damaged, but it did not collapse. Perhaps the irregular geometry of the plan gave a certain stiffness to the structure. On the outside of the sacristy, a small epigraph dated 1721 marks the completion of those repairs. The work involved the construction of a new neoclassical facade facing the Piazzetta San Giovanni, the rebuilding of the northeast wall of the church to keep it from buckling with the scucci a cucci piecemeal method of rebuilding a wall while it remains standing. There was work of stabilizing the vaults with iron rods restraining the outward thrust of the masonry vaults. And last, the upper section of the bell tower was rebuilt as a sail type of bell tower. That is a flat masonry wall with arched openings where the bells are hung, an inexpensive way to rebuild the bell towers. After that earthquake, practically all bell towers in town were rebuilt in that manner. The only addition to the church was a stair connecting the main sanctuary to the monastery via the second floor above the sacristy. In the interior, the 16th century stucco interior decorations were heavily damaged and were removed and replaced mostly with the painted mural decorations.
By the middle of the 19th century, a new partition is built that closes off a corner of the sanctuary and turns it into a storage space on two levels, thus eliminating a chapel that had been dedicated to the Madonna of the Rosary. There are some questions about the time when this partition was built. There are some elements that indicate it could have been built earlier in the 18th century. However, by 1859, it was definitely in place. On the second level, there was a new screen window for monks to follow services and a door to accessing a new organ loft. The organ was installed in 1859. It was made by Count Alderano Spada, a well-respected organ builder from the nearby city of Terni. To give access to the organ loft, the stairs connecting to the monastery was split in half, and a narrow gangway was built accessing the second level above the storage space. Probably at this time, a 17th-century Baroque wooden altar is moved into San Giovanni Battista, from the Church of Santo Gemini, as the church goes through a complete interior renovation between 1830 and 1850. 4 17th-century Baroque wooden altars are dismantled and moved to other churches in town. 1 altar to San Giovanni Battista, 2 are moved to the Church of San Francesco, and the last one becomes the main altar of the Church of Santa Caterina. The altar labeled B is placed right in front of the main 18th-century entrance of the church. It may have become the main altar of the church at this time. Eventually, in 1955, it is moved again to its present position as the main altar of the church.
In 1955, the Church of San Francesco goes through a major restoration, and it is decided to remove the 2 Baroque wooden altars that had come from the Church of Santo Gemini because inconsistent with the architecture of the medieval church. The 2 altars are moved again, this time to San Giovanni Battista. At this time, altar B is moved to the present position as the main altar. The canvas of Our Lady of the Rosary by Benedetto Bandiera is trimmed and reframed into this altar. The painting was originally hung in a defunct chapel of the Confraternity of the Rosary. Altars C and D coming from San Francesco are placed in their respective positions as shown in the plan. In 1973, the 12th-century facade of the church is renovated under the sponsorship of Alberto Violati. The old entrance and bifold windows are opened. New steps are created both in the interior and exterior of the church to connect the old entrance to the street. The rough masonry under the facade that had been exposed since the 13th century was covered with news-facing stone. Also, the unfinished right edge of the facade was completed into straight edge with new masonry. The old necropolis that had been exposed since the 13th century was covered with a new concrete floor that creates an apron that provides an intermediate level between the church entrance and the street below. Recently, the church organ was dismantled and restored to an operating condition at the beginning of the 21st century. It is now located on a wall near altar C. From 1999 to 2004, the students and faculty of the San Gemini Preservation Studies performed a survey of the church and the adjacent Augustinian monastery, producing a full set of architectural drawings including plans, sections, exterior and interior elevations, plus drawings of details of decorative elements. This presentation is based on that survey. They also performed a round of maintenance on the 12th-century facade, cleaning the stone, repointing the mortar joints with compatible materials and doing some minor stone restoration.
San Gemini Preservation Studies is a summer field school, now in its 27th year, that organizes lectures, research, fieldwork, workshops and field trips in the disciplines of conservation and restoration of cultural objects. It has been operating in the town of San Gemini in central Italy in collaboration with the local community and institutions. We are also associated with the Art History Department of the West Virginia University in Morgantown.